Thanks for coming. My name's Laure, and I'm doing a PhD up the hill at the Department of Politics and International Relations. And a year ago, almost to the day, on a sort of gloomy, rainy November day like today, I received an email saying that my request to go and conduct research in Indonesia was accepted. And that was really exciting because it was the culmination of 2 months of form filling and official document gathering, and religiously following this little booklet here, the Foreign Research Permit Guide, which is actually quite, extensive. And so off I went, and I arrived in the capital of Indonesia, Jakarta, around last Christmas time. If you are a bit confused as to where Indonesia is, it's this sort of smattering of island at the bottom of your world map. It doesn't look like much, but it's actually the 4th most populous country in the world. And if you count the sea in between the islands, it's the 7th biggest, so it's huge. And so I arrived in the capital and started going around on those motor taxis and zooming around the traffic because I had to collect the letters and authorizations necessary for my stay and my research there. So what I did was go to the Ministry of Research and Higher Education, where they gave me forms like these. One more here. And then I had to go to the Ministry of the Interior, where more letters were given. Also obligatory trip to the immigration office that actually took 3 visits. And finally, the police headquarters where I got this traveling permit. After all of this, in January, I was finally allowed to go and get closer to where I actually wanted to do research in the capital of the province of North Sumatra. And there was more letter swapping and stamping, like so. And after which I was allowed to go to the rural area where I actually wanted to go and conduct my research. And that meant going on this awesome 12-hour bus ride overnight. And it's a really cool bus because it blasts Indonesian pop, dangdut, for the whole night. And it has these really bright pink Hello Kitty blankets that you can get under because the AC is freezing. And so in the morning, I arrived in this town where I wanted to conduct research, which is this string of houses and shops and rice fields along a main road. And there, of course, I had to present this beautiful stack of letters to the local officer in charge of foreigners. And said local officer wasn't really convinced that I was doing a PhD and wasn't really sure what I was doing there. So I had to sit across from him over those really sweet cups of tea that you get in Indonesia that are delicious, to answer questions about what my research was about and who I was and how come I was doing a PhD and all these sorts of things. And so we finally came to an agreement that I would send him messages and pictures every day about where I was going and who I was meeting, and that I would write a report at the end of my stay, which of course I agreed to do. But I did feel like I was under surveillance. And the reason that I'm going on about the wonderful word of research permits and letters is that, ironically, my reason for being in Indonesia was that I was researching another kind of surveillance. And the kind of surveillance that I was researching and wanted to find out more about was that of forest, tigers, rhinos, orangutans, the people who threaten them and the people who are protecting them. What I'm curious about is what happens when we start deploying CCTV around the forest like we do on our city streets. What happens when some people claim they use satellite imagery that can detect the falling of a single tree? What happens when conservation employees are asked to report on what they see and where they go, a bit like Amazon warehouse workers? Now, don't get me wrong, species are becoming fast extinct and we're losing the critical ecosystem functions at an alarming rate. Indonesia, for instance, lost 350,000 hectares of primary forest just last year. It's likely to be worse this year given how bad the fire season has been that you might have seen on the news. And the the national park that I spent time in, which had its headquarters in this little town with the strip of houses and shops along the road, this national park actually only has 34 employees. And these 34 employees are tasked with cataloging and looking after an area that's 3/4 the size of the Peak District. So they can do with some help. And in theory, the better we learn about and the more we know about where trees are being raised, where species are being hunted, animals are being hunted, and where and when that happens, the better. And technology can help with that in theory. The fact that the national parks are so wide also means that the managers, the superiors, are having a hard time knowing if their employees are actually doing their jobs, covering the areas that they need to cover, steering clear from collusions with poachers and hunters. And it turns out that the technologies that they can use to record wildlife and what incidents that might threaten wildlife can also be used to check if they're doing their job. And that doesn't only happen in Indonesia, that happens in hundreds of national parks over the world at the moment. But for me, the issue with that is one of sort of unintended and counterproductive consequences. Because the expansion of surveillance and data collection is not something to be taken lightly. And as national parks employees around the world are coming under scrutiny and surveillance, they might feel that they're not being trusted by their managers. And they do try and avoid this scrutiny through different means. So they will turn off the devices that they're supposed to use to track their itinerary and their observations when they want a break. They will lose them. They will send someone else to collect data that looks half believable. And wouldn't you do the same if you were suddenly asked to justify every nitty-gritty thing that you were doing at work? You might. And so I think while there's a need to protect nature, there's also a risk that by thrusting surveillance technology upon people who are charged with doing that, we might lose their goodwill and willingness to do it. So I did talk at the start about how uncomfortable it was at the control of the Indonesian authorities, but I did know about that coming in. And there's a reason for this side control on researchers, because Indonesia has this long history of colonial plunder, and also more recently, researchers coming in, taking ideas and resources, and not properly acknowledging Indonesian people or researchers that might have contributed to those ideas and collecting these resources. And so, as recently as 2012, there was a case where 2 Western researchers wrote this beautiful paper claiming that they discovered a new species of giant venomous wasp. But what they didn't do was acknowledge the 2 Indonesian researchers that had A, collected the specimen that was described, B, suggested a name for the wasp. And to add insult to injury, they named this wasp Garuda, which is this mythical bird and national symbol in Indonesia. Like, it's even the name of their national airline. And that might seem like a small slight, but actually it's not, because nowadays the way that we make a living as a scientist is having our names on peer-reviewed papers. So it was actually a big deal. So that surveillance is, there's a reason for it. But that of conservation employees also makes me feel uneasy. But it might be a justified means to an end that we want. That's something that I'm not sure about and I'm still grappling with.